There's a roadmap to success in business, and I'm specifically talking about 8 and 9-figure businesses because I think you could go out and build a 7-figure brand grinding harder than pretty much anybody else. But in my experience, there's a few things that go on behind the scenes of the companies that predictably grow and turn into large brands. And I've watched you master this. And we're going to go into some of the companies that you've built. But in short, you've got a commercial insurance in business, you've got a surety bond business, you have a restaurant business, you've bought and developed commercial real estate, you've done a whole bunch of things. Some of them are passion projects, some of them were investments, and then some of them are the things that you really, really focus on in life. But the foundation to your success is not in the grind that everybody says that you need to do. And it doesn't come from reading a book a week or being first to market. Now, we've known each other probably close to like 20 years, not just in business, but as really good friends. And I've watched you consistently do one thing with your clients, with your employees, with your family, with your friends across the board. One thing. And I think that one thing is why you're successful. And it's that you consistently over deliver. I've never seen you do anything small. And that doesn't mean that you throw big parties. It means that I've seen you always seek to give people more than they expect, no matter what they're doing with you. And I know that there's a lot more than that. I know it goes much deeper than that, but that's part of why I'm excited about having you on today. So I got a ton of questions from you all over the board. I've got questions about family and business and everything. But if it's okay with you, since this is a business podcast, let's go back to the very beginning. Can you start by just telling us what was your very first business?
So I delivered newspapers when I was a kid. I was probably, I think, about 13 when I did that. And I had a group of friends that were also doing it with me. So we had a bunch of different routes. And I decided it was best that we kind of pool our money together and that we would get all these routes and then, work together and putting the newspapers together. On a Saturday, you would have to put together Sunday's newspapers in order to deliver them. And that turned into like just a fun fest for us as guys that we had this Saturday afternoon that we all hung out in the back of a store together and put the newspapers together. And then we had this drill sergeant that controlled all the routes. He was an older guy, smoked a stogie and, and stunk like, he hadn't taken a bath in about 2 weeks. But, uh, but we had such a kick doing it and we made money doing it because we pooled our money together and we all shared in that wealth. So it was my first introduction into business and making money. And it was just so much fun and just the connection between the people that were doing it. And I feel like business in general is really about people and the connection. And at the end of the day, yeah, you can have a great plan and you can also, execute that plan. But if you're really not enjoying the people that you're doing it with, and you're doing it not only with people that you like and that have commonality with you, but people that are devoted, they have the same goals as you do. So I think that's so important. So I always look at not only talent, but really about the depth of the people and if they have the right attitude, right? Because if they have the right attitude, they can learn skills. They can do a lot of other things. But if they don't have the right attitude, then obviously it becomes a lot more complicated and it's usually the relationships that end pretty quickly.
Wow, that's a huge, huge lesson. Did you know you were learning that lesson? Did you feel it back then? Because, man, I was in a bunch of little businesses in the beginning, and I don't think I looked back and actually understood some of the massive value I was getting from them until years later.
Yeah, I think that there was a natural knack for me in a lot of ways on how to deal with people, and I was always kind of like the likable guy, and I got along with people. But at the same time, what really I think took me to the next level is when I really started to realize what were my strengths and what were my weaknesses, and how to identify other people's strengths and weaknesses, and really focus on their strengths and say, okay, they might not have this that they do so well, but they have this that they do tremendously well. So when I'm building a team, I'm always looking for, what does that team member bring to the table and what's he really great at? I think that's important.
How do you assess that in people these days? Like, not just the strengths and the weaknesses, but the attitude also, because onboarding people with an understanding of that, I mean, it saves a lot of blood later on.
Yeah, yeah. And, I mean, all our people take like an aptitude test. And I find that sometimes when I stray away from the result of the aptitude test, it always comes back to like bite me,
Really.
bites me right in the ass and says, you know what? You weren't as smart as the aptitude test. But I'm not saying it's 100% accurate, but it does have some quantification to it. And I've learned how to, at the end when I get that aptitude test, and even though my gut might be saying, "Hey, well, you got to be a little forgiving, and maybe the aptitude test isn't right," and I make that higher, 6 months later, I'm regretting it.
And do you have ones that you guys prefer right now? Because I know that, again, you and I have talked about this many times, and there's a lot
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah, we use one called Omnia Profile. That's what we're using at the moment. Yeah. I think we've used a couple others in the past.
Yeah, I mean, we've used everything from Myers-Briggs to StrengthsFinder to there's just so many of them, but Omnia, I've not heard of. So it was delivering newspapers, and then what? What was the next step?
Yeah, yeah, and then the other one that again, that I had a lot of fun doing was we used to run these school dances, right? So we wound up renting a hall. I remember the Falcons Club in Newark, and we rented a hall out, and we had these dance parties that we would invite everybody to. And I mean, I think at that time, we're serving liquor, and we were like 16 years old. So there was probably something wrong with what we were doing, but we had these tremendous parties, and it lasted for probably around a year until the Falcons Club started to realize that most of the kids in there were minors and they were drinking. And of course, that went out the window because it was a nonprofit and they didn't want to get in any trouble. But of course, we shouldn't have been doing that anyway. We had so much fun. And we had DJs coming in and sometimes bands, and we all made money. We were making we actually made a tremendous amount of money. I remember one year, there was 5 of us doing this, and I used to run the door with a couple of the other guys, and we made this is in high school, right? We made each out of the 5 of us, we made about 16,000 each. So, it was a nice little profit for a young kid in school. Yeah.
So the big lesson there is move forward and then beg forgiveness afterward.
Yeah, yeah. I've begged for forgiveness a lot over my years. I get excited about stuff and I just want to do it. I think, one of the things that most entrepreneurs don't know is the word no. And we don't know the word no. We just believe that we can get something done even when people around us are looking at us like we're crazy, But that's what changes the world, in a lot of different ways, right? Because if we all saw our limitations, we probably wouldn't take on the risk. Or if we had the fear factor. I mean, I think the most important thing is when you're young and you're starting a business, not having the fear factor and not realizing what you don't know, right? As you start getting more experience, you realize all the mistakes that you've made. But a lot of the times you wouldn't have taken the risk had you not had that lack of experience, right? And sometimes that risk actually works out. And if it doesn't work out, hopefully it was a lesson that allows you to move on to the next venture and do it better.
That's massive. That's a massive lesson, and I don't think like, I see so many people who come to me for business, and they wanna get everything right. They wanna cross all their T's, dot all their I's, they want all the right introductions before they get started. They want everything lined up because they think that's gonna guarantee success, and the only thing that's ever guaranteed success in my life is just move forward and then fail, and then
Agreed.
fix it, and then move forward again, and then fail, and then fix it, and eventually you fail less, and you have slightly less fixes or much bigger fixes, but you jump forward faster at that point.
Yeah. And, I think as entrepreneurs, like we're creative people, right? And not only are we creative, but we want to create, right? We want to create something and we want to, be able to do it in a way that, we're proud of the product or we're proud of the service. We're proud of what we're doing. And I think everyone has a little bit of that in them, right? Unfortunately, I'm not gifted with music. I'm not gifted with sports. I'm not gifted in a lot of other ways that I like to be gifted in. So, when I was, starting to do business and I found, my gift there, I always feel like I want to create and I want to be creative and I want to give back, to the people around me, especially the people that work with me on a daily basis. It's so important to have that bond, and feel that connection with people when you're doing something. I think, it pretty much allows you to have a better life overall.
Hey, you said something I gotta go back to because it's very similar in my life, and I think it's really profound. It's what drives you. My question really is, what drove you to start? What drove you to keep moving? But you said part of your drive is to give back to the people. That's always been mine. My very first business was really to surprise my parents. I did it because I wanted to show them that I could earn something. And then the next one was to surprise them even more and to surprise them even more. And when my first book came out, I didn't tell anybody I was writing it. Nobody. And then it, in fact, I think you knew me when my first book, that was
Yes.
2004. I didn't tell anybody. And then it came out and then I'm like, here it is. And I showed everybody after it was printed. But it was always to surprise and or always give. Like I always wanted to build up the people around me and I would bust my butt, not take any money from the company, not do anything until everybody else was really flush and happy. So
Yeah.
one
Well,
of the
isn't that like, yeah, like, isn't that what servant leadership is about, right? I mean, like, I always feel like people don't work for me, I work for them, in the sense that, I want to make sure that I perform my best so that I'm contributing to the team, right?
Yep.
It's tough sometimes to be a leader and sometimes very lonely, right? And I'm sure we've all been there. We're blessed in a lot of ways because we have a group of friends that, obviously meets on a regular basis and we share thoughts and ideas and we help each other out. But most entrepreneurs, most business owners, there is a lonesome to it, you know? When you're able to actually be transparent and share some of, what's going on with you with your team, it also helps, you know?
Yep. But that's
And it's not
a
always
very dangerous
possible.
thing. That's very dangerous.
Yes,
I've
it's not
never
always possible,
right.
right? Yeah, yeah. But definitely, I think when you can do it and you have the right team members, then it makes for a better dynamic. It makes for a better company. And that's what takes you from good to great. We all want to wake up in the morning and just, enjoy life and enjoy what we do. I think that, if you're not enjoying what you're actually doing on a daily basis, then you're failing yourself, right? I mean, that's the most important thing is to be happy with your daily life.
Yeah, and to be
I never quite understood like the employee mentality of, well, I want to work, 25 years and get my retirement. And then I'm going off, to retire in Florida and I'm going to be able to fish every day. Well, you know what? I want to fish when I want to fish and be able to do what I want to do. I'm not going to wait till I retire. I want to do it now. So I think that's one of the things that allows us, right, as entrepreneurs and business owners is we do have flexibility because we can do some of the things that we enjoy while we are working hard at building our businesses and contributing to others.
right. Yeah. And I think it's because the foundation was right. Not everybody has that. Not everybody in business has that ability. But you went from delivering papers to peddling booze to minors, and then what?
Yeah, that was the best time, right? So I got into sales, which, I think was always in my nature. So I did do some like quirky sales jobs and sold everything from products to services and so on. But then I met a guy who was in the insurance business and he kind of introduced me to the business. Ultimately went to work for him and married his niece, who's my wife today. And I think he had some really great qualities about him as a business owner. And he was very successful in his own right. He lived in like a 50-acre, 20,000 square foot mansion in, Far Hills, New Jersey. So it's like for a young guy starting out, it was like, wow, what have you achieved? And of course, you're looking at material things at that point in time. But he also had that certain joy de vivre, right? He knew how to live life. He lived a big life, but he knew how to live it in a great way. So he taught me a little bit about like enjoy it every day. Don't just wait to retire to enjoy it, but enjoy life every day. And I think that's one of the things we get to do as business owners, right? Is enjoy a little bit of every day.
That's a tough one to learn. What were you in your teens or 20s at that point?
No, I was in my 20s at that point. I was like, you know, 23, 24 when I went to work for him. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a tough lesson. In my 20s, I remember, I mean, everything was grind and try to bank something.
Yeah.
I wasn't
Yeah.
good at it in the beginning. Like I'm we're able to grind.
Well, And that's great. You do want to have that fun, factor, especially when you're young, and
Yeah.
do all the things that you probably should be doing. But as life goes on, you start to realize, I've done that, and you move on.
Hey, is that what took you then from that job to starting your own company?
Yeah, yeah. So I was with him for 7 years, and then I wound up at 29 starting my own company. And he was kind of disappointed that I was leaving at the time, and it wasn't really something that he was expecting, but I knew it was the right thing for me. I wanted to be independent, and I wanted to do my own thing. So, it was a little tough in the beginning. Obviously, you don't have all the resources, and you were used to living a certain lifestyle, and I was making good money at the time. My friends thought I was crazy, but it all worked out, and it worked out in a good way, and I'm so happy that I did it.
Is he still around?
No, unfortunately, he passed, fairly young. I think he was like 71 when he passed of a heart attack. But even he even knew how to like pass away. He wind up like being at the Four Seasons restaurant in New York City on his 71st birthday and had a massive heart attack. And of course, try to get an ambulance in New York City to get you to the hospital on time. But he went in a big way.
So let's look at your first business is Dale Group, right? It was named Dale Group in the beginning?
Yeah, yeah. So my wife Dana, right? And I'm Lee, so we kind of meshed each other's names to form Dale.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. So obviously who's the favored, right?
She came first.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So then you move from his company as an employee to now you've got your own company. How do you go about getting your first clients?
Well, so I had my employee number one who worked there was a great account manager at the time at his shop. And she was out on maternity leave. And I called her. I said, "Don't go back. Come work for me." And she was like, "What are you crazy? Like, what do you have to offer me?" But somehow I convinced her and she came to work for me and we started the company. And then I had a couple other employees that year that came on board. And, I just went to a lot of the clients that I already knew and obviously a lot of new clients that were in my pipeline from being there and the business just started. And, it wasn't easy in the beginning, as most businesses aren't when you start out. But, it was the most fun I ever had. I mean, even, like, the thin years when things were lean and you didn't have a lot, you learned how to make do, with what you had, and I think that's so important because sometimes we have all this abundance and we take it for granted. And I know sometimes, like, I look at myself and I'm like, "Wow, do I need all this?" Because when things are lean, you learn how to really make the best of the little that you have.
Yeah, listen, I would never give up the abundance part. I'd never want to give up the abundance part because it allows you to really help a lot more people and do a lot more great things. But when people ask me, what are your favorite memories from growing any of your businesses? My favorite memories are way back to my health club days where I literally was trying to figure out how to pay payroll. And then we moved into a much larger club in New Jersey, and I was literally staying there helping the HVAC people, helping the sheetrock people, helping the plumbers put things in after hours, and because I couldn't afford to pay them everything, I was their helper. Like, the really tough days, those are my favorite stories. Like, I remember them remember them with pride and with a lot of gratitude, but I would never wanna do it again.
No, I don't disagree, but it's been a while since I had to figure out how to make payroll, but I remember those days, and I mean, I remember not taking payroll for myself and having to pay, my employees, which was perfectly okay because I was the one, putting it all on the line, not them. But yeah, those experiences obviously, make you stronger and you don't forget them. And like you said, abundance is nice, because, I also like to give back. And I always say charity starts at the home. So, I try to do as much as I can for family and friends who need it. And I think that's important. I think, you should start locally and then move on from there. And we do a lot with, charity foundations and so on. But at the end of the day, it is nice to be able to help other people because you have a little extra. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanna say something about what you were saying before, but we have to talk about the charity thing. One thing that I admire about you, which, I mean, there's a long list, but similar to my companies, our belief is you should always be charitable. the right kind of charities, right? Not, you should always research and do the right kind of charitable work, but never brag about it. And in all the years that I've known you, I don't know that we've ever discussed that. Like you don't go out there and say, "Oh yeah, we donate blank percentage of our income to this." Never. So, I think that's admirable and rare these days because so many companies leverage that. They do it either for tax purposes or they do it for marketing purposes. And I think that's kind of scummy.
Yeah. And, look, we like to give back to things that we feel passionate about. And my wife's been a big proponent of certain, women's groups, women that need help, that are a little more disadvantaged. And, she's taken a big step towards doing that with network of lady friends. And I've been supportive of that. And I've been supportive of a bunch of other charities that I'm involved with. But I think it's important that you do it. And you're right. I don't want the pat of the back or the acknowledgement. That's not what I look for. I really want to do it because I feel it's the right thing and that I can, that I have the ability to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it
I think
makes
it's important.
it gives you something else to work towards, at least in my life. So you went from 0 clients and you come over to your own business. And now fast forward to today, and we're well in excess of, you've worked with over 10,000 clients, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so obviously we've morphed our insurance business into something bigger through partnerships and so on. So we're doing over 200 million a year in revenue, and we have thousands and thousands of clients. So it's a real business with a lot of potential for the future. And we look at who's next in line and how do we prepare the next generation and other people within the organization to take over the business because, we're all getting a little older and we realize that we're not going to be around forever. But yeah, it's a team sport. This is not an individual sport. It's a team sport. And at the end of the day, you have to look at all your team members and look at, like I said, their strengths and their weaknesses and figure out how they play a role in it.
And a few years ago, you and I were having a conversation, and you made a slight shift in your model. So you started going into acquisition mode, and you started hunting around for, companies in your industry that were not where they were having troubles, and you were able to go in there and absorb them in, buy them or just absorb them in. And now your growth is not just in clients, but in other businesses that you're absorbing in as well.
Yeah, and I probably wish I would have done that sooner because I think, the quickest way to really grow a business is through acquisition, right? And there are plenty of businesses out there doing it. I think you need to have a good executed plan on how you're going to do that. And there does have to be a certain amount of due diligence because you want to wind up again with the right people with the right attitude. Normally, when we're doing an acquisition, we want the people to stay on board for a certain period of time. So we're going to be in a relationship with them. We want them to be our kind of people and we want them to be able to play by the same rules that we play by. So I think it's important and it doesn't always work. Sometimes you realize this didn't work out exactly the way I thought, but and if you have to unwind a deal, you unwind a deal. But I think on the most part, if you get good due diligence done in the early stage, you'll wind up with the right party and you'll do well and that business will continue to grow. And that's what we're doing.
We've done a bunch of this also in a variety of different industries, and the due diligence is by far the most important part for us. And I don't even get involved until there's been legal due diligence, and then the bookkeeping due diligence and everything else. So give me an idea, if you don't mind, of some superficial due diligence that you always require when you're going into this. And by the way, let me preface this by saying our due diligence is on the people as much as it is on the business, because the skeletons in the closet or the personality that has been infused in the business has a lot to do with the first 3, 6, 12 months once we acquire them.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I agree. As you know, in these particular situations, sometimes not everyone knows about what's happening. So you have to be, a little confidential in the way you conduct your due diligence. But I try to get at least a little background, not just a like personnel bio, but really, hey, tell me a little bit about this person, what they do, and like what drives them. Why do you see them as an asset, or where do you see their weaknesses? I think that's important. Like we try to gather that information early on before we even meet them, and then we, of course, we make our own assessment after we're able to meet them in person. We also are very particular about financials, so I do always use a third party to conduct the quality of earnings report to make sure that, hey, this is what you're saying you're doing, and these are what your financials should be. But now that we've looked deeper, it doesn't exactly picture that way, right? So, that's always important for us. We don't want to be in a situation where, we figured out we didn't buy something that we thought we did, and it wasn't driving the same type of revenue or profitability that it could. So we have an independent, CPA firm that does our quality of earnings reports for us on every deal. But you're right. The people factor is definitely the most important part. Are we getting the right people and the right team? And, it's easy to look at financials and see that something is either profitable or not profitable, but a little more difficult to, assess the human factor and make sure that this is going to be a long-term, endeavor that they're going to be able to live with us, whether it's for a 5-year period or perhaps, for a much longer than that. So I think the combination of both helps.
Hey, have you ever, I assume that most of your acquisitions, if not 100% of them, have been in your industry, in the insurance industry or the bond industry? Ours have not been. Like ours are often, if we really consistently use a service, then we will either build or purchase that service company, like somebody that we have a relationship with and bring that into the portfolio. Have you done that at all?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, not to segue into like one of my passions, which is food, right? But I'm invested in the restaurant business, and I've had multiple locations. At one point, we had like 5 places running. We've kind of ironically sold off 4 just before COVID. People thought I was a genius because, you know. December before COVID, I sold off 4 restaurants. It just so happened to work out that way. But we've done due diligence on those type of establishments, obviously a little bit different than our core business, insurance and surety. So yeah, and we've done due diligence on real estate deals because, as you know, I'm an investor in real estate development and acquisitions of real estate properties. So yeah, there's always due diligence that needs to be done, and how you do it obviously depends on what type of business it is. Getting back to the restaurant industry, like I said, one of my passions is food and wine. And if you've ever gone out to dinner with me, Chris, because you've only done it a few 100 times, you know that I usually take over the menu and I order for everybody, and nobody's allowed to eat unless I tell them what they're eating.
Yeah, well, first of all, dude, I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's not your choice. That's our choice. When anybody's out with you, we immediately hand it to you and say, pick the wine, pick the food. We're just gonna talk while you're doing that.
You know what? Food is just such a blessing, right? You think about the fact that, when you're born, the first connection that you have is with your mother putting her breast in your mouth and feeding you as a baby. And that connection starts immediately between, the mother and food, right? Nurturing and the nourishment that you're getting from it. And as you go through life, food, it's not only about the nutrients, but it's about the flavors. It's about the experience. It's about, sitting around the table with friends and family and laughing. Those are the things that really make it enjoyable, right? And that's what I really love about it. It's not so much the food per se, although I love great food. It's the camaraderie when you get together at a table and you break bread together. It's enjoyable. I love to do dinner meetings and break bread and have a bottle of wine. You get to learn a lot about people when you do that.
I was out with a group a while ago and they asked me something about what I thought the definition of success was. And I said, listen, in my life, I feel the most successful when I'm sitting around a big family meal or a family and friend meal, and we're just relaxing and talking and enjoying time together. Breaking bread with family and friends is the best. And the ability to be able to afford the time and the expense to that is massive. Like that's a big part of success for me.
Yeah. And it's what unifies family and friends, right? You think about your, lifetime and the moments that you had, it usually revolved around that dinner table or a restaurant somewhere or a friend's house. There's so much connection that happens during that time.
Well, yeah, I have an Italian background, so it was
Yeah, of
a
course.
restriction of love with my mother, with my grandmothers. It was always, "You don't want seconds or thirds? Do you not love me?
Food is love.
More."
Yeah,
Yeah, it was.
absolutely.
Listen, I want to go back real quick to the insurance and the bond industry. You have this reputation. When we started, I talked about over delivering. You've got a reputation of over delivering, and I'd like to ask you of kind of an example of how you do that in those companies. But before you answer that, I'm going to give you an example, and it's something that you and I spoke about the other day when we were talking about this show. As you know, I was one of my companies. I think a couple of my companies have done business with you. But this particular story is based around one of my companies was getting insurance with you. And I forget exactly what the insurance was for. It was for an event that we were putting on or something like that. And then, and your team did a great job. It was Kevin and Nelson over at your office. And they did a great job. They set it all up. They took care of everything. And then fast forward maybe a year or so, and I needed some documents. So my team got in touch with your guys and was asking them, "Hey, can you get these documents for us? We need them for our file," or whatever it was. And they jumped right on it. But they weren't able to get us the documents. Like, it was days were going by, and my guys were saying, "Well, we haven't gotten them yet. We haven't gotten them yet." And I said, "All right, well, I know the owner of the company. Let me just reach out to you," or I don't know if I reached out to you first or if I reached out to Kevin and Nelson, but I reached out and I said, "Hey guys, we really need this document. Can you get it over to us?" And I forgot that during that time period, we relocated the company from New Jersey to Florida. And at the time, you didn't have coverage in Florida. So we moved, like, with the help of your team, they helped us find somebody and they moved the policy for us to another company entirely. So we were going back and forth with your guys to try to get a document, and they didn't say anything other than, "Yeah, we're gonna get this for you." And they were calling the other company and arranging this all for us. And then when I finally stepped in, they're like, "We'll have that for you by the end of the day. We've been trying to get in touch with the company who holds your policy." And I'm like, "What do you mean? Oh, you don't you hold the policy?" And they're like, "No, like you moved the company. We don't even handle that state." And I literally took a step back and I'm like, what a wonderful example of over delivering. They'd never even mentioned it to my guys. They took charge, they moved forward, and they were just doing it.
Well, I'll just say this to you, okay? You're a VIP client, but so is every other client in my office a VIP client, you know? And that's, the kind of service that we want to make sure we deliver above and beyond what the expectation is. And I think when you do that, that's why you maintain, like we maintain like, 98% retention ratio, right? Because of the fact that we give, tremendous customer service and we make sure that the client's happy. The insurance industry is a tough business. And obviously, it's not the sexiest conversation when you're at a cocktail party and when you tell somebody you're in the insurance business, where they're usually running the other way, thinking you're trying to
You're not
sell them
in
something.
that insurance industry. You're in commercial.
Right, exactly.
Commercial totally.
But you know what? It all gets categorized almost under the same light. But nevertheless, I think that, it's important for us to make sure that, people see us as a provider of great service, not someone who's just trying to sell you something. And that's the way we conduct our business, give people great service. Do we want to sell you something? Yeah, we want to sell you what we believe you should have. We want to make recommendations, but we want you to buy it because you want to buy it because you know you need it, you feel, this is something that's important to me. So we put the options on the table. And, we're really lucky to have just great people on our team. And like I said, you hire for attitude, right? So, people with the right attitude will always take care of your customers.
Well, I think you hired right. I mean, it really is a testament because a lot of offline companies like yours, when they went through COVID, they didn't necessarily lose a lot of people. You hear a lot about companies who, well, people, their team had to be offboarded because they couldn't afford it, or, whatever the case is. But also, a lot of companies lost the drive. They lost inside their employees. Those employees stopped caring. They stopped giving the same service because now they were working in their pajamas, right?
Right.
And they weren't able to get that back. Your company was able to shoot right back into it, which,
Yeah.
I was grateful.
Listen, we've made some adjustments just because, we have to, and the marketplace is a lot different than it was prior to COVID. So we have a hybrid schedule. where they work 3 days in the office and 2 days from home. But at the end of the day, I think it's also a quality of life thing that we're able to give them a little bit better quality of life. I think that's important. But we have people that have been with us since the beginning. I mean, our tenure in the business, we've been doing this for 34 years, and we have people that have been with us for 30 years, for 25 years, 15 years. Like, we don't have a lot of newbies. I mean, we do because we have to hire new people all the time, but the core of our team is around forever. We have very little turnover. And I think that's a testament of how we treat our people, right? Because I know the recruiters and the headhunters are out there and they're trying to poach them and they're trying to give them more money to move. But at the end of the day, when people are genuinely happy and you pay them well, I don't think there's that desire to move on to the next job. So, we're lucky to have a great team. We're lucky to have great retention with our people. Our people are loyal to us and they do a good job for our customers.
Is your I don't know the title of this, so if this is belittling, I apologize. I know she's more than this. Does your receptionist still work there?
Number one receptionist in the world.
In the world.
In the world.
In the world.
Right. Yeah, she's incredible. She is incredible, and, she's a perfect example of someone who really cares and who's got an incredible attitude, and she's like a 24-year-old girl, at, 87.
She's 87 years old?
No, she's, I think she's, yes, I think she's 86 going on 87. Yeah.
You would never know she looks so much younger than that. Whenever like I've been to your office for meetings a handful of times, and, I've always gotten there a little bit early just to kinda hang out and talk with you because she like it's such a nice break between what I'm doing in my office to then get to you guys, and then I relax talking to her for a little bit, and then I go into the
Yeah.
meeting. She's amazing. She's like the heart of everything there when you walk in. It's really nice to always go see her. You had a growth spurt in, I think it was 2007, where you moved into the bigger location. Was it 12,000 or 17,000 square feet or something like that?
Yeah, I was, that's going on, I don't know, I have to do the math, but that's going on 15 years. Yeah, it goes
Yeah,
by.
it's a
Time flies by.
I know, I remember when you were doing
Yeah.
it. But why did you make that move? Was it because you needed the extra space or because you were preempting another growth spurt?
Yeah, so we definitely needed the extra space, but we were also preempting a growth spur, and that's what we decided to do was, let's go buy something bigger and fit into it, and we did it. We did it. Put the pressure on ourselves and the goals to continue to grow the business, and that's what we did. Today, you look at it and you say to yourself, with all the remote employees and ability to have, people in other offices and so on, it's a little bit different, but we still use our space wisely, and we're actually folding up a couple of smaller shops into this office, and we have some other people going remote, but we're making the best of our real estate and trying to use it wisely.
What states are you in now? Like, I know the main is New Jersey.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're in about 24 states right now. Yeah, yeah. So,
That's amazing.
yeah.
Let's talk about something more fun. Let's talk about food. What initially I think your first restaurant the lounge in
Martini.
Milburn?
Yeah, Martini and Melbourne, yeah. So, I had no intention of going into the restaurant business, even though I bartended during college and, I enjoyed that. It was a lot of fun. But I always had a passion for, food and wine, and, I like to dine out. I like to try new places. I genuinely enjoy the artistry of food, and how, chefs, can be so creative. What was it, Michelangelo who said, "I saw an angel in the marble
Yeah.
and I had to carve it out," right? And I feel like, chefs are super creative, right? They see something, and they see things that we don't see sometimes, and they present it to you and you say, "Wow, that's amazing." So,
Shocked at the first time I went to eat there, and I don't know if I ever told you this, but I went there a bunch of times. I went there a bunch of times, and then I spoke to you about it afterwards. Like, I didn't talk to you about it until after I had been there several times. Every meal I ever had there was amazing, and you explained to me how, listen, that these are not the words that you use, but basically, the restaurant is built around the chef. Like, we bring a chef, like, The chef
Right.
is great. That's why your experience is great. And for this day, I don't know that I've ever had a better salad. Like, it was like, it didn't fit on the plate. It's
Yeah.
a beautiful presentation, but it was a mountain.
Well, I remember that chef, and he was into vertical food, so meaning, like, everything was, like, stacked and so on. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But, yeah, I mean, having been in a bunch of restaurants and invested in a bunch of restaurants, it really taught me how to even be a better businessman because you have to really run a good business in order to survive in the restaurant industry. And, it's not only about the food, obviously, but it's about the people. It's about, making sure your finances are in order. Unfortunately, a lot of restaurants are bootstrapping all the time and they don't have a lot of money to do, marketing. They don't have, a lot of money even sometimes to buy the best quality ingredients that you can in the marketplace. So, it's a tough business, but we've been able to do it profitably, and we've never had a restaurant that failed. And we sold off a few of them, which was appropriate at the time because we had partners. We felt that they wanted the business for themselves, and we didn't, want to be in the partnership. So it was the right move. But my son, who wound up going to college for hospitality and marketing, and then decided he wanted to run a place that we had, and it was just in its infancy. So he's done an incredible job, like building that business up, which is Luco in Florham Park, and he's now opening another location. So he's not only doing a great job, but he's living it and he's passionate about it. I offered him an opportunity to be in the insurance and surety bond business. He hasn't taken me up on it, but he's enjoying it and he's having a good time doing it. People love the place, and it is generally a fun place. I go there and I enjoy it too because it's a fun place. And I think,
Like, great
yeah,
food. Yeah.
I think that's the direction. Like even today, like the white tablecloth and dining establishments are no longer as popular. People would just want great food in a more casual environment. As you know, people don't put on a suit to go out to dinner anymore. So, you want to have a place that's not pretentious but has great food and people feel relaxed. And
Good food and good people.
yeah, absolutely.
So, Jonathan, your son, I remember when you brought him in, I forget what he started as, a bartender or the host or whatever he started as.
He started as a dishwasher, quickly became a bartender.
That's a big step up financially. Yeah, and he was, prior to that, a great marketer. Like, he had a great marketing mind. And he stepped in, and I didn't see that side of him, that he was such a good people person. But I went there, and I think I met him one time before. I think, like, you and I were eating there with some friends, and he probably met me there. But when I went in there, he immediately walked over. He was like, "Chris, great to see you again." He had it down pat. I just felt like I was at home, and he took care of us, and it was wonderful. But I saw him go and do that with a lot of other people while I was there. Like,
Yeah.
he's the man when it comes to this. Like, he
He's
really
got
does
he has
do
a
it.
great personality and he knows how to be a good host. I think dad taught him well. But, he really is, a quality guy. I mean, and I love, there's no better feeling, right, when people brag about your children, right? So, when I get compliments about him, it makes me feel great, like, just like, you're doing right now. But he is a good guy and he does a great job. People, they go there a lot of times because of him. Yeah.
Yeah, he was, we actually went there to see him one time. I brought a daughter, and I were out to dinner one time, and I said, "Let's." It's, by the way, I think you remember where I used to live in New Jersey. It was not a close drive.
No, 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 it's
5-minute drive or something.
there, like an hour
Like,
away.
I want you to go here. It's great food. It's Lee's. She knows you. And we went there, and that particular.
She's adorable, by the way, and we wish her the best. I know she's going off to college, and we wish her all the best.
Yes, yes, yes. She's in love with your wife. She has such
Yeah,
a warm spot in her heart for Dana.
that's nice. That's nice. I was talking to Dana about her the other day.
But we went there, and that was like, Jonathan had just left to get supplies or something, so we missed seeing him that day. But it was still just an amazing meal.
Yeah. Well, and the one thing about the restaurant industry, it's given him, tremendous ability to be a good entrepreneur, is that there's always a fire going on somewhere. And you have to be fixing things all the time and resolving problems. And, And I said, John, this is the biggest life lesson you're ever going to get, because whatever other business you go into after this, it's going to be easy compared to what you're doing here on a daily basis. And he said, I think you're right, Dad. So
Where's his next location?
it's actually in Whippany, which is a neighboring town on Route 10. Yeah.
Same.
He's doing a cafe, Luco. Yeah, smaller version of what he has now.
Do you have any desire to ever open up another pizza place? I know that you had a very upscale pizza place that was connected to one of your other restaurants.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he's doing pizza in the cafe. He's doing that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good reason for me to take another trip to New Jersey.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, we welcome you up, man.
All right, so we listen, we talked about Jonathan. We have to make a segue into commercial real estate because that's another passion of yours.
Right.
And I am seeing this very unethical side of you now that you brought your son into one of your passions and your daughter's like a real estate developer in Miami now. So you trained them both to take on parts of your passions.
Yeah, yeah. I just need one of that. I need to have a third child, so somebody can come into the insurance and surety bond business. But yeah, so Freddie, my youngest, Freddie's 27, and she graduated from Boston University, and then she wound up getting her master's degree down at the University of Miami in real estate development. So she took a job down in Miami with a real estate developer, and she's currently working on a $180 million hotel renovation in South Beach on the beachfront there, and she's really blossomed. I see her growing, and she's always been industrious. And I'm so blessed that both of these kids, really hard workers, and they're industrious and they're entrepreneurial in a lot of ways too. So she's learning the business. But I spoke to her the other day, and the senior project manager on the job site was having some issues, and she's kind of like the conduit between the owner and the general contractor. Her company's the conduit between the two of them, right? So they direct everything from what's happening with construction, what's happening with interior design, who the food and beverage operator is. They're coordinating all this, right? And her and one of the other project managers, which by the way, they're both ladies. And there's a senior project manager, which is a gentleman. And her boss basically said to her, I don't know if this senior guy is as good as the both of you. So you're going to be running this job pretty soon. Just the two of you. So for a 27-year-old girl, it seems like overwhelming, but she's got the personality that she can take on the world. And I just love it because I know the project is going to be tremendous. She's going to deliver it at the end of the year. And I can't wait to go to the grand opening and be part of it.
Yeah, I want an invitation.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's how does the saying go? I forget, but basically, our kids don't listen to us, but our kids watch us. So you and Dana have done such an extraordinary job. And it's, you can't hide it in your children. And your kids are just, and by the way, they've always been amazing. Like, I didn't know you when your kids were born, but I knew you when they were young. And to listen to the stories of their desire to keep moving forward, to keep doing things, whether it was school or work or any of the other things that they've been doing, it's always been a pleasure to listen to. Like, they've always been moving forward, and that's rare. Like, it's not really rare in our circle of friends because we're all very focused on family as well as business, but it's really rare in the real world.
Yeah. You know what? And I have to give kudos to Dan on this because, she was a stay-at-home mom and she spent a lot of time with our children and making sure that they were getting the best education and making sure that they had, great manners and treated people with kindness and so on. I think, just being a good person is so important in society, right? And we always said, like, we didn't take pleasure from someone giving us kudos because the kid got a trophy or an A or was top of his class. We got the most pleasure when they told us how kind and how polite they were to them or their children. And that's both our kids. They're great people. They treat people, with fairness and equality. And I think as a parent, if you can do that, you feel like you've achieved something.
It's something huge. I can't tell you how many families I've seen of entrepreneurs who do things the wrong way. Entrepreneurs who literally give up their family and their personal health and everything else just to try to grow a business and then hope that they're going to come back and have a family and rebuild their personal health. It sad to watch. But I remember being at dinner with you one time in Luco's, and it was early on when I think Jonathan had just become a manager, or he it was early on when he was there. And he came over to the table to talk to us, to say hello to everybody, and then he knelt down next to you. I'll never forget this. Like, I am very attuned to how kids talk to their parents and how husbands and wives talk about each other when they're not there. Very attuned to that. And I tune people out immediately when it's not a good scene. But he knelt down next to you and he was asking something about business. And like, your hand was on the table and he put his hand right on top of yours. So where most kids don't want anybody to see affection, especially at this age, he literally connected with you. The whole time he was talking with you, he had his hand on top of yours, and then he said, "Thank you," and he walked away, and he said goodbye to everybody. Like, everybody else was talking business at the table, and that's what I was watching.
Yeah, well, that's very observant of you. But yeah, we do have a tremendous relationship with both Dana and I, with both of our kids. And, I think I always say, like, if your kids don't like you or love you for that matter, then who the hell does, right? And it's the same, with you, right? If you don't love or like your children, then who the hell are you going to like and love? It's a two-way street. And we're blessed to have, these two kids that have great relationships with us. And there's no better enjoyment for me than a family vacation, than all of us together, with their significant, others, whether it's a boyfriend or whether it's a fiance or whether it's a wife. Jonathan's getting married later this year. But it's like, having everybody together and going away and spending time and, being able to enjoy each other for a week or two. That's just, to me, it's the best. I enjoy that more than anything in life.
I think that our little group of friends has learned a lot from each other when it comes to business. One of the biggest things that I ever took from any of our conversations, yours and mine, was that. And it was, the moral of the story, and then I'll go backwards and I'll tell you how it started. But the moral of the story was, every gift you ever give your children should be an experience. And it should be an experience with you, because that's better for them. It's better for you. It's better for the family unit. And the way it came up was, we were talking about a vacation that you were going on with your family. You had gotten a boat, and I think you were going around Spain, and you said, yeah, so the kids, it's going to be Dana, myself, and the kids are allowed to bring one of their friends. And I'm like, well, go deeper in that. Why is that? It's an interesting vacation. And you said, listen, we don't have that many years with our kids where they're going to want to spend time with us. So
Right.
this is my way. Like, I want them to always have an extraordinary memory of something that we did together. And from a greedy standpoint, I'm gonna lock them up a little bit on a boat so they can't get away from me, and we have to spend some time together.
Yeah, so we get a boat or we rent a house, where, I got them in the compound and they can't leave, but I find a way that we can stay together. Everybody has their own hotel room. It's not the same, when everybody's in this house together and, and we're sharing the same pool together, it's a lot different. But man, I want to do it for like the grandchildren. I want the group to get bigger and I want to have everybody with me. Oh, I can't wait for that.
That's exciting.
You know,
I thank you for that particular lesson.
and I find that as long as you're paying, they're a little more tolerant to come.
Yeah, listen, I remember you saying that in the past. However, I didn't want
Well,
to bring
I'll
it up.
pay with pleasure. I'll pay with pleasure to enjoy their company.
Hey, what's a normal day look like for you now? You've got, the insurance, you've got the real estate, you're juggling a lot of different things. What's a normal day?
Yeah. I mean, I try to, obviously organize my day based on meetings because most of the time I'm spending time in meetings, right? Whether it's a meeting about insurance, whether it's a meeting about surety, whether it's about real estate deal. So unfortunately, we've now all got into either a Zoom or a Teams meeting, but I still now starting to do a lot more in-person meetings, but it is more efficient, when we're able to have a Zoom meeting and knock off something. So it's about communication, right? When you communicate, you get things done and, you're able to, see where the problems are lying and hopefully get them resolved fairly quickly. with everybody on the phone or with everybody in a virtual meeting. And that's really the composition of my daily life these days, is just going from one meeting to the next, from one day to the next, doing some dinners, sometimes business dinners in between, flying out to see, maybe a new acquisition, or meeting with a new partner that we've taken on, and spending some time. I'm down in Miami and Florida for a couple meetings with partners down there. I'm in Michigan, Detroit next month for a new acquisition that we did out there. So yeah, it's definitely a full day all the time, but I also get energized from it. And I try to, even be able to do some more stuff. Like, we have a home at the beach. So, I'll go down on Thursday and work down there during the weekend, even if I'm taking some calls and having some meetings. It's a lot more flexible these days than it was in the past. So trying to intermingle, your personal life with your business life and keep it all intact.
What about before and after? Like we talked, that was mostly about work.
Yeah.
Like what's a normal, you have a noise?
So my new regime has been get up every morning, usually around 6:30, and I have a home gym. If I'm here, I have a home gym here. I have a home gym down at our beach house, and then we have a place in Florida, so they have a gym in the condo building that we're in. So the first thing I try to do is roll into the gym, and I've learned that, stretching is so key to my life these days. And I wish I would have been stretching when I was younger. I didn't do enough of that. But I try to do about 20 minutes of stretching. I do about 30 minutes of cardio, and then I do about another 20 minutes of weights. So, within a matter of a little bit more than an hour, I got a full workout in. I do a green drink in the morning, and then probably around 11, I have a cup of coffee. So I don't need coffee right away to get me going. I think the green drink kind of percolates everything for me. And then I have my coffee around 11, and I usually don't eat lunch. I might have a snack around like 2 or something like that. And then usually we do dinner, whether I'm going out to dinner or having dinner with Dana, or, you know, having dinner by myself, depending on where I have. But yeah, I mean, as you get a little older too, you start to realize you don't need as much, and you have to be a little more regimented in how you live your life in order to be able to hopefully live a little longer.
Well, yeah, you've got grandkids that you were talking about before. So,
Grandkids that I want, I don't have them yet.
hey, we've got a lot of listeners who are seven-figure owners and they want to get to eight, and we have eight-figure owners who want to get to nine. And one of the things a lot of the gurus talk about is that
You talking about revenue or personal bank account?
I'm talking about revenue. But one of the things that, there's a lot of quote unquote experts online talking about is that you need to focus on one thing, 100% on one business until you're well into the eight-figure range. Then you could grow other companies. And for the most part, I agree with that for a lot of people. That's not how I did it, as we talked about earlier. But I'm curious because you and I kind of live the same life when it comes to businesses, but I think that you were much more focused initially. What are your thoughts on focusing on one business, or when is it appropriate to invest in another company?
Well, I think that, you do need to have one core business that obviously, is generating enough revenue for you to start getting involved in other businesses, right? So at some point, if you have, hypothetically speaking, if you have a $1 million business or a $2 million business, and you want to invest in another million or another $2 million business, and I know guys who are very successful at doing that too, where they have all these small businesses. But I think, you need to be at a point where your business is, 10 million or over in revenue, and hopefully producing, an EBITDA of, 25%, where you have some stability, and then you could start diversifying and investing in other things. Look, when I was young, I wanted to be a millionaire, and, now that seems like a loser to me, because you got to be a billionaire to even matter in the world.
Well, then I'd say that, but
But, it's just a different world, and you do need a certain scale in order to, be a leader in an industry. And I think, it's your preference, right? Like, what is your objective? Is it just, "I wanna have a lifestyle from these businesses, and I'm happy with the lifestyle," or do I wanna dominate a certain industry, Because obviously you want to dominate an industry, then really need to focus on that industry and spending a lot of time on doing that. If you're just looking for lifestyle, yeah, you could probably make the same amount of income and revenue from 5 small businesses that you do from one big one.
Yeah, well, I mean, that make your eye twitch.
Yeah. And look, I've seen guys who manage small businesses and very rarely even step, their foot into the businesses. They have managers running them, and they're managing the P&L, and they're taking money out of each one of them, and fishing in Florida and playing golf. And I'm like, wow, that's great, man. How do you do that? I mean, is it ever going to be like this great business? No, but it affords them a lifestyle that they're happy with.
Yeah, it's what they want. It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
I think
So
it,
so I think as entrepreneurs, we're all kind of different, right?
yep.
And like I know you and I know me, we need to create, we need to see our vision come to reality. We need to, make sure that we're feeling like we're important in our industry and that we're doing a great job.
Yep, absolutely. Hey, I'm gonna kind of make a right turn here. When I'm in flow, meaning when business is going well, when I'm feeling super close to my family and my friends, when my health is on point, during those times, I usually pull out a piece of paper and I write down all the things that I'm doing, because it's always nice to be able to look back on those notes when things aren't going so well, just to kind of see, well, what had me in flow before? What was I doing that was making things go so well for me before? So let's make believe that you've been doing that same exercise for the last 10 years or so. What do you think some things would be on your list when you were consistently doing really great in everything?
I think that when you have alignment with your team, when you have alignment with your significant other and with your family, you're probably operating at the highest level.
Mm,
When you don't have any distractions, when your team is like totally supporting you, when your family is totally supporting you, they're just energizing you, right? You're getting this energy that you will not be able to get. Often, right? And I've seen this happen, where, you have distractions, right? You may have, and they often come from the personal side, right? Whether, you're having difficulty with a child, or you're going through a divorce, or, that just zaps so much energy out of you that when you're trying to focus on a business, it's just not going to be there. You can't have that focus, right? So I think that's really important. And of course, when you start having, fraction among your key people, and you see problems going on there, and you can't fix it fast enough, or get rid of the person who's creating the problem, that becomes a big energy zapper, right? When you're in ultimate harmony, when it's all working perfect, right? Your team's great, your family's great. It's like, wow, now all of a sudden, like, nothing can stop you, right? Everything is just amazing, and you can conquer the world when that is, yeah, that is not easy to do, because it has its moments, and there's peaks and valleys, and and people get ill, and there's so many things that happen throughout life. But when you have that perfect, storm of great team, great family, just feeding you energy and love, just want to conquer the world.
I know. I think it's important that we have checks and balances in each area of our life to make sure, at least in my life, I don't see things going off the rails sometimes until we're like at the precipice of having a problem. And then I'm like, oh, damn, let me step back in, whether it's a business or it's a personal problem or whatever it is. So with the checks and balances, I don't get there nearly as often these days as I did, 10, 20, 30
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah. And listen, it happens to all of us. It happens to all of us. I mean, we take a lot for granted. We take life for granted. We take, relationships for granted. We take our employees for granted sometimes. And as we know, anything could change at any point in time, and it could put you in a tailspin because you didn't see it coming. Often, there's all these little breadcrumbs being dropped, and you're just not,
Yeah.
you're just not watching them. Oh, I missed that. Yeah. So I know exactly how you feel.
Yeah. Hey, if there is one, what is one success tip that you got that was a game changer for your business?
I mean, I think the biggest success tip that I got for me personally was like, you can lie to everyone, but be honest to yourself.
Wow.
And it's so true. Like, you gotta really, like, dig deep and realize, like, who you are, what you're capable of, what you're good at, what you're not good at. And when you have that candid conversation with yourself, then you can say, okay, I know I'm great at this, but I'm not good at this. So I gotta either get myself to be better at that, or I have to surround myself with people that are great at that to make me better as a person in an organization.
Yeah, that's deep. The next question I have for you kind of aligns with that, but I think I'm going to ask it and then answer it for you and then see if you have a different answer. It's, what do you think the best lesson would be for a seven-figure company, an owner who has a seven-figure brand who wants to get to 8 or 9? From what you said, especially early on when we were talking here, the differential between the way you started and the way I started was huge. I started almost in secret. Like most of my first businesses were me alone, and I just kind of wanted to do it. And then me alone and something else, and I wanted to do it. Whereas starting in your very first business wasn't even your business. It was just like your job. You surrounded yourself with people. And then your second gig, you surrounded yourself with people. And then when you started Dale Group, you immediately went in there with, you knew how to bring people in. Huge, huge lesson. And I didn't do that. I didn't learn how to build a team until I got into the health club industry, and I had to fill spots. I had my godfather. Well, he's no longer with us. He was a brilliant man. He was a Mensa guy. He was a business consultant. And I remember him calling me up when he was very old, and we were having this conversation, and he just said, "How are you doing? Like, how are you doing in business?" And I told him, we're doing okay, and here's what we're building, and here's the team we have. And he goes, "I'm so glad that you learned this lesson. You cannot do it alone. I don't care how good you are." He goes, "If I could ever just feed you one thing, you cannot ever do it alone." And I remember it was like, blew me up when he said that, because I didn't even realize it at the time, but he was so right. So I'm glad you started that way. But if you had, one lesson that you think every seven-figure owner is missing, and that's why they haven't been able to get to 8 or 9, what do you think it is?
Well, I think it's exactly, what team building's about, right? It's, you can go out and get the best horses, but at the end of the day, invest in jockeys. And that's how you win the race. And when you're building a business, you can create a great business, you can have great design, you can have great features on how it'll all work, but it's the people that are driving it that are gonna make the difference for you. And yeah, you gotta have the right people. It's so
Yeah.
key.
Okay. So then, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And like I said, earlier, this is a team sport. It's not an individual sport. And it's so much more pleasurable when you win together.
That's amazing. Hey, I've got one last question for you. If you could go back to little Lee when you were just getting started, and, whether it was your paper route or when you were, intoxicating 16-year-old kids or even before that, what would you say to him?
I would probably say to him, life has no boundaries. Don't be scared,
That's great.
because
Yeah. Well, it seems like you lived that no matter what. Like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I think there were moments in time where I did have some fear and it held me back sometimes. I wish I had been a little more fearless. I wish I would have jumped even deeper. I wish I would have risked even more. Especially as you start building a family, right? You just start taking less chances because
Yeah.
it's so important to protect them and make sure that, you're not inconveniencing their life. So, but if I had taken bigger risk early on, I know I'd be a lot further ahead.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know that I believe that. I think that you've done some amazing things with family, with everything. There's possibility that had you taken bigger risks, you would have burned out.
Well, I remember being like so enamored by one of the guys in our group who had like taken his company 300 million at that point in time. And nobody had, at that point, probably gone more than 10 million, and here's this guy who was already at 300 million. And I'm like, man, maybe I haven't done something right. So, you sometimes have a little regret. But I think in the end, like you wind up being where you're supposed to be, right? So right now in my life, this is where I'm supposed to be. And I'm glad I'm here and I'm looking forward to the future. I'm still living it like, I'm the guy who just started the business, which is like fun for me.
That's awesome.
I think data thinks I'm crazy, that I'm not slowing down, but I guess it's in my DNA.
Crazy makes good stories.
Yeah,
Or you'll have good stories to tell future generations.
I hope so.
Hey, Lee, thank you so much for this. This was amazing. I'm honored and grateful that you spent time with us today.
I'm honored to have done it, man. It was a pleasure. You're a good guy, you're a great friend, and, I know, you're very successful in your own right, and, I love the podcast. I listen to it all the time. So keep up the great work.
Thanks, buddy.
All right, man.